Hey there, welcome back to the channel. They didn't see your worth when you were right in front of them, and that's the part that hurts the most. You weren't hiding, you weren't playing games, you were available, loyal, consistent, real, but they didn't notice. Or maybe they noticed and still chose to look away. You didn't ask for much, just honesty, just effort, just someone who wouldn't make you feel like you were too much for simply wanting to be loved properly. But instead of giving you that, they gave you silence, distance, confusion. You kept holding on, thinking maybe they'd change, maybe they'd wake up, maybe they'd finally see you. But they didn't. So one day, something inside you just broke quietly. You didn't shout, you didn't explain, you didn't try one more time. You simply stopped. Not because you didn't care anymore, but because you finally realized you were the only one who ever truly did. You went silent. And now, that silence has become the mirror they never expected to face. Because when you were speaking, loving, giving, they could ignore the truth. But now that you're gone, your silence is showing them everything they refused to see when they still had you. They're not used to this version of you, the one who doesn't chase, the one who doesn't explain, the one who no longer gives them the privilege of your presence, and it's shaking them, because the person they once overlooked is the person they now can't stop thinking about. If you feel this deep in your chest, if this is your unspoken story, I want you to drop this in the comments right now. They didn't see my worth, but my silence is showing it now. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to uncover exactly why your silence is speaking louder than your love ever did, and how, through that silence, they're finally facing the truth about losing you. Number 1, your silence is the first time they're truly seeing you. When you were speaking, they weren't listening. When you were reaching out, they kept pulling away. When you gave your whole heart, they responded with half effort. You were showing up again and again, hoping one day they'd finally look you in the eyes and realize this person is rare. But they didn't. They were too busy feeding their ego, chasing distractions, assuming you'd always be there. Until you weren't. That's when the silence started. And that silence, it's the first moment they were actually forced to see you. Not just the image of you, not the version of you who kept saying it's okay when it wasn't, but the real you. The one who had limits, the one who had value, the one who, despite all the love, finally walked away. It's ironic, isn't it? You spent so long trying to make them understand with words. Long messages, late-night calls, honest confessions, tears you wiped away in silence after they left you unread. But they ignored it all. Now that there's no more noise from your end, they're finally hearing the message. Because silence doesn't need explanation. It reflects everything they refuse to face. Your silence is showing them the weight of your absence. They're beginning to feel the difference between your presence and your distance. When you were around, they were numb to your effort. But now, every quiet moment is a reminder that the person who used to care deeply no longer makes space for them. That realization hits in the most unexpected places. When they scroll through old photos, when their phone lights up, but it's not your name, when a song plays that reminds them of the way you laughed when things were still warm. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And now that your silence has left them alone with their thoughts, the colors aren't so pretty anymore. They're seeing their coldness, their games, their neglect, all through the mirror you left behind. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of the truth they didn't want to see when you were still speaking. They thought you'd always wait. They thought you'd come back. But now your silence is saying everything your voice was tired of repeating. Let's keep going, because the next truths will shake them even deeper. Number 2, they thought you'd break down without them. They were so sure you'd fall apart, that the moment they stopped replying, you'd spiral, that your nights would be filled with tears, and your days with desperate overthinking. Maybe for a while, they were right. Maybe the silence did hurt at first, not because you needed them, but because you gave so much of yourself that walking away felt like leaving a part of your soul behind. But what they didn't see coming was the strength you'd find in the middle of that pain, the calm that would come after the storm, the version of you that would rise, not bitter, not broken, just done. You didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't explain your silence like you used to explain your emotions. This time, you just let the silence breathe. And in that stillness, you found something powerful: yourself. They thought silence meant defeat. They thought you were drowning in it. But you were building in it. Building peace. Building confidence. Building the kind of clarity that only comes when everything fake has fallen away. And they're feeling it now. That shift, that unbothered energy, that peace that used to come from their validation, but now comes from your own growth. They thought you'd be texting paragraphs, watching their stories, subtly liking their posts. But instead, you disappeared, not just from their notifications, but from the version of yourself that used to need them to feel enough. That quiet is loud. It says, "I've outgrown you." And that message? It doesn't need punctuation. It's felt. Stoicism teaches us that real strength is not in controlling others, but in controlling ourselves. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And that's exactly what you did. You stopped trying to fix someone who wasn't willing to meet you halfway. You stopped arguing for your worth. You stopped proving what should have been obvious. Now your silence has flipped the roles. They're the one wondering what you're doing. They're the ones scrolling, checking, waiting for a sign you still care. But you've moved past the need to prove anything. You're not waiting. You're walking. And the most powerful part? You didn't do it loudly. You didn't announce your growth. You just became someone they no longer recognize, because you're finally becoming someone you finally recognize. If this speaks to your soul right now, I want you to drop this in the comments. They thought I'd fall apart, but I rebuilt in silence. Ready for what's next? Because the truth is, they're not just missing you. They're missing the version of themselves that only existed when you loved them. Let's keep going. Number 3, your absence taught them what your presence used to give. People don't always understand value while they have it. They take comfort in assuming something or someone will always be there. You were that presence, that quiet stability in their chaos. You didn't need to make grand gestures or say big words. Your consistency said everything. The way you listened, the way you checked in, the way you remembered the little things. You gave them emotional safety, and they mistook it for routine. When they rejected you, they didn't just walk away from a relationship. They walked away from a safe space. But because you were always emotionally available, they thought they could come back anytime, that the door would never close. They assumed you'd always stay soft, always stay waiting, always stay hopeful. But then you removed your presence, not with anger, not with drama, just quietly. You stopped texting good morning. You stopped asking if they made it home safe. You stopped offering your energy to someone who never protected it. And at first, they didn't notice, or pretended not to. But slowly, very slowly, the silence became uncomfortable. Not because of the noise it lacked, but because of the warmth that was missing. Now they're beginning to understand something they never questioned before. You were the peace. You were the balance. You were the reason things didn't fall apart as quickly as they should have. Your love wasn't loud, but it was strong. And now that it's gone, they feel every inch of the space it used to fill. They open their phone and no longer see your name. They post something and realize you're not watching. They go through a bad day and instinctively think of you, only to remember you're no longer there to lean on. That realization doesn't come in one big wave. It drips in slowly, like water leaking through a crack they didn't know existed. That's when the regret starts, quiet but constant. You see, your absence did something your words never could. It revealed to them what you actually gave. And it hurts, not because you're punishing them, but because now they feel what they once ignored. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be one." And you were. You gave them good love, real love, love that stayed even when it wasn't appreciated. And when that love disappeared, so did the comfort they mistook as normal. Now you're not just gone, you've become the reminder that not everyone stays when they're taken for granted. That lesson will replay in their mind, again and again, but it's too late to unlearn it, too late to rewind it, because you've already outgrown needing them to understand. Number 4, your silence made them realize you were never the problem. They used to blame you for everything, didn't they? You were too emotional, too available, too intense, too serious. Every time something felt off, it was always your fault. You cared too much. You expected too much. You asked for clarity. You asked for time. And somehow, those basic human needs became the reason they distanced themselves. But now that you've gone quiet, now that you've stepped back, they're being forced to see things they never saw before. For the first time, there's no one to blame but themselves, because you're no longer there to argue back. You're not explaining yourself anymore. You're not defending your heart, justifying your love, or trying to fix what you didn't break. And without that constant noise, they're alone with their own truth. And that truth, it doesn't feel good. Because deep down, they know they pushed away someone who only wanted connection. They labeled your vulnerability as weakness. They mistook your loyalty for desperation. They called you dramatic when all you wanted was to be heard. But now that your voice is gone, they're hearing everything they refused to listen to before, inside their own mind. When people are emotionally immature, they don't reflect, they react. So when you brought up something that hurt, they called it nagging. When you needed reassurance, they called it insecurity. But now, the silence you've left behind has become a mirror. And in that mirror, they're seeing it wasn't you causing the chaos. It was their inability to meet you where you stood. Your silence is not just the absence of words, it's the removal of energy. It's the withdrawal of care. And that creates a space where truth reveals itself. The things they once dismissed are now haunting them, not because you're reminding them, but because your absence allows those memories to speak freely. They replay how many times you tried to make things work, how you forgave when you shouldn't have, how you showed up when they didn't even notice. And now, the silence keeps playing that highlight reel on repeat. Every scene they ignored is now crystal clear. Stoicism teaches that clarity doesn't always come from noise. It often rises from stillness. As Seneca wrote, "Sometimes silence is a punishment, and sometimes silence is a remedy." In your case, it's both. It's the consequence they never expected, and it's the medicine you gave yourself to finally heal. You're not bitter, you're not angry, you're done. Done with being misunderstood, done with being blamed. Done with explaining that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave. Now they sit in the silence they once begged for, and in that silence, the realization hits. You weren't the problem. You were the proof they never learned how to love right. If that hits home, drop this in the comments. My silence proved I was never the problem. Number 5. Your silence exposed the illusion of control they thought they had. Let's be honest. They thought they had you wrapped around their finger. Maybe they didn't say it out loud, but their actions did. They knew you'd always reply. They knew you'd forgive. They knew they could hurt you today, and you'd still care tomorrow. That's what made them feel powerful. Not because they were strong, but because you kept showing love even when they didn't earn it. They confused your softness with submission, your consistency with dependence. They thought your world revolved around them, and as long as they gave you crumbs of attention, you'd stay hungry for more. But then you disappeared, and suddenly, everything they believed about your love fell apart. That silence, it didn't just confuse them, it rattled their ego, because the one who used to beg stopped asking. The one who used to wait walked away. The one who used to break down rebuilt quietly. And now they're left wondering, did I ever really have control, or were they just giving me chances I didn't deserve? The silence stripped everything down. No more excuses, no more distractions, no more emotional games. Just the cold truth that they never really had power over you. They only had access to a version of you that loved deeply, and now that version is gone. People who love with all their heart are powerful in ways the world doesn't understand. They're willing to fight for someone, to forgive, to stay loyal even when they're hurting. But when that kind of person stops, it's final, because it's not anger that made them leave. It's clarity. And that's what your silence gave you. Clarity. You saw them for who they really were. You saw how much you were giving and how little they were matching. And instead of screaming it out loud, you simply left space between you. A space they thought they could fill whenever they felt like it. But silence doesn't work like that. Silence doesn't play games. Silence says, I'm done letting you believe you ever had control over me. And now they're the one checking their phone. They're the one hoping for a sign. They're the one feeling powerless because the silence they once ignored has turned into the echo of every chance they threw away. The Stoics never chased what was beyond their control. Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You're living that now. You've stopped trying to change them, fix them, or reach them. And that decision, it shattered the illusion they lived in. Now they sit in their pride, thinking of the silence as punishment. But it's not. It's reality. And in that reality, they're no longer in control. You are. Number 6. Your silence forced them to sit with what they've done. There's something brutal about silence. Not because it's loud, but because it doesn't let anyone hide anymore. When you were still talking, still reaching out, still trying to make sense of what went wrong, they didn't have to think. They didn't have to face what they did. You were carrying the emotional weight for both of you. You were the one overthinking while they were sleeping peacefully. You were the one rewriting messages while they were ignoring your worth. But then you stopped. And the moment you did, something shifted. Not in your voice, not in your tone, but in their mind. That absence they once treated casually, it started haunting them, not because you said something clever or dramatic, but because you said nothing at all. And in that silence, they were finally left alone with the one thing they've always avoided, themselves. They don't have your texts to blame now. They don't have your calls to dodge. All they have is memory. And memory, when soaked in guilt, becomes a mirror they can't escape. Now they see the look in your eyes when you were hurt and stayed. Now they remember how many times they dismissed your needs, how they pushed you away while expecting you to still hold on. When people don't have to face consequences, they never grow. And as long as you were trying, they didn't have to. But your silence changed that. You stopped being their emotional safety net. You stopped softening the blow of their actions. And now the full weight of their behavior hits them, and they have no one to blame but themselves. They're sitting in their room, scrolling through your old messages, not because they care about the words, but because they're desperate to feel something again. But what they feel now is empty, hollow, because everything you gave, your love, your time, your patience, was real, and now it's gone. And here's the hardest truth. Your silence didn't just make them miss you. It made them meet the version of themselves they tried to hide from. The selfish one, the careless one, the one who thought you'd never leave. And they hate that reflection. They hate that this silence makes them realize they were never as kind as you, never as loyal, never as present. And that comparison burns. The Stoics teach us that no person can run from their own conscience forever. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. And now their thoughts are stained with regret. Regret they don't know how to express because you're not there anymore to receive it. You're not watching, you're not waiting, you're not checking in. And without that audience, they're finally forced to sit in the silence they created. And for the first time, it's louder than anything you ever said. Number 7. Your silence proves you don't need closure from them. You gave it to yourself. Let's tell the truth that nobody tells. Most people never give you the closure you deserve. They ghost you, they blame you, they twist the truth to protect their own ego. And the more you try to ask why, the more confused and broken you feel. That's the trap, thinking that your healing depends on their explanation. But something changed. You stopped waiting for them to explain. You stopped begging them to make it make sense. And instead, you made peace with not knowing. That decision, that's real closure. Not something they gave you, something you gave yourself. In silence. They thought your silence was temporary, that it was just space, that you'd come back eventually, like always. But this silence isn't a break, it's a boundary. It's a message without saying a single word. I don't need answers from someone who never respected my questions. When they realize they can't bait you with crumbs of communication anymore, it messes with their pride. Because the power they thought they had over you was built on your need for clarity. But now, you don't need it. You've accepted what happened. You've made peace with how they treated you. You've looked at the wound, cleaned it, and started healing without their help. That's terrifying for someone who thought you couldn't move on without them. They didn't expect you to get stronger in the silence. They didn't expect you to stop caring about the what-ifs. They didn't expect you to stop rereading old messages or replaying the last conversation in your head. But you did, because silence taught you what their words never could. You are allowed to walk away without permission. You are allowed to heal without apology. You started showing up for yourself in a way they never did. You started creating peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's behavior. And in doing so, you broke the cycle. The cycle of trying to fix what they kept breaking. The cycle of begging for love you already gave freely. The cycle of explaining yourself to someone who never really listened. As Epictetus once said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You stopped trying to control their reaction. You stopped needing their validation. And you found freedom in that silence. That silence, it didn't destroy you, it rebuilt you, stronger, calmer, clearer. And now they're left in the silence, wondering how they lost someone who no longer waits for closure, but creates it. Here's the truth, and I want you to hold it close. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally started caring about yourself more. And that shift? That's everything. You didn't slam the door. You didn't cause a scene. You didn't need to. Your silence became your answer. Your stillness became your statement. They thought you'd always be there. They counted on your kindness. They misread your patience as weakness. But now they know your silence wasn't the absence of words. It was the presence of strength. And that strength didn't come overnight. It came after nights of breaking quietly, of crying without anyone noticing, of questioning your worth in the dark. But now look at you. You're not just surviving, you're awakening. You stopped trying to be heard by people who never listened. You stopped proving yourself to someone who didn't even see you. And you stopped chasing love that was never mutual. That's not bitterness. That's power. That's growth. That's what healing looks like in real life. Not in quotes, not in perfect posts, but in real, raw moments of letting go. So if your silence has left them thinking, good, that means they're finally feeling the echo of everything they ignored. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you. You found peace in the quiet. You found clarity in the distance. And most of all, you found yourself. If this video touched something real in your heart, drop this in the comments. My silence was my healing. And don't forget, subscribe for more truths like this. Like the video if you felt seen. Share it with someone who's still waiting for closure. Let them know they don't have to wait anymore. You're not what they lost. You're what they'll never find again.